You're listening to the All People podcast, sponsored by Go Sherm, where we celebrate the essential elements of DEI that unite all people. And now, here are your podcast hosts, Ms. Lakita Harmon and Dr. Nadia Saluk.
Welcome back, everybody, to the All People podcast. Today, we are diving into a topic that is as complex as it is important, and that is the clash between your belief system and DEI. Listen, diversity, equity, and inclusion, they're fundamental to creating a thriving workplace and communities. But what happens when these principles intersect or even conflict with deeply held personal beliefs at that? Nadia, I'm excited for this conversation. I know this is going to be good. Don't you think it is?
I am looking forward to it because, oftentimes you implement initiatives in your organization, and there's always this, assumption that this is what you believe in. And it's not really about us personally as HR professionals. It's what we are bringing to our organizations and for our team members to understand the importance of different initiatives. So I hope this podcast is eye-opening for others who might be struggling with implementing initiatives that they might not agree with, but still have to do it for the sake of the job.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great conversation. And I want to also just take a moment to just say thank you to all of our supporters out there in our audience. You guys continuously tune in, and we just sincerely appreciate all of the wonderful feedback that we receive from you guys. Trust me, it means the world to both of us. And so jumping back in, when we think about this topic itself, these types of moments, it can be challenging, it can be thought-provoking, and even uncomfortable, but they are also opportunities for growth and understanding. And in this episode, we plan to explore how these tensions, they show up in the workplace dynamics, how organizations and individuals, they, can navigate them with authenticity, and then the impact that these, interactions have on the company culture and leadership. Whether you're an HR professional, a business leader, or someone who's passionate about fostering inclusivity, this conversation, it's definitely going to give you insight and strategies of how to approach these types of, challenges with both empathy and intention. And to help us to tackle this fascinating topic, I am just thrilled. Well, both Nadia and I, we are completely thrilled to be joined by an extraordinary guest. She's a dear friend of mine. I've known her for a lot of years, and that is Miss Dorea Mays. And if you don't know, she is also the recipient of the HR Professional of the Year Award that was given to her this year at the HR Florida conference and expo that took place. And she's an exceptional leader who has, just set new standards in the HR industry. And so I want to just introduce you guys to Miss Dorea Mays and also just give her a chance to share a little bit about herself before I go into her bio.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited about the conversation today. And as Lakita said, I'm Dorea Mays. I'm the Director of Human Resources here at Rosen Hotels and Resorts. And I oversee a staff of 50 HR professionals. We're a hotel company. We have about 4,000 associates. And not only do we do hotels, but we also have 2 preschools. And those preschools are not for our associates. They're actually community adopted preschools where we provide free childcare for those in the community from the age of 2 to 4. We also have a Rosen Aquatic and Fitness Center, as well as a health facility, a insurance company, a technology company. And so we do a lot of different things here at Rosen Hotel. So I wanted to kind of share that as a little bit of a foundation.
Yes. And let me tell you, I'm well familiar with just the Rosen brand. And, Rosen, you guys have such a huge impact in the community itself. So it goes beyond just being a hotel. And I love everything that you guys stand for. So we're very excited to have you here with us, Dorea.
Thank you.
Now, let me tell you a little bit more about her incredible journey as we, prepare to get ready for today's conversation. Dorea Mays, she is a lifelong human resources practitioner with more than 30 years of professional experience serving in the hospitality, security, nonprofit, and retail industries. She is the director of human resources at Rosen Hotels and Resorts, a 7-property hotel company with over 4,000 employees in Central Florida, as well as subsidiary business units, including a medical center, technology company, and insurance company, 2 preschools, as she mentioned, and a family fitness and aquatic center. In her current role, she oversees all human resources functions for a large team and leads the organization's human resource strategy. She is an HR subject matter expert with a proven track record in employee relations, organizational development, compliance, transformational coaching, and leadership development. Prior to Rosen Hotels and Resorts, Dorea's career included, human resources roles in industries such as retail, car rental, security, and nonprofit. Known as a natural born leader, Dorea is the current vice president of the Hotel Human Resources Association of Orlando. She is an active member of the Greater Orlando Society for Human Resources Management, Go SHRM. Dorea's passion for community service has led to her current involvement in nonprofit boards to include the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation of Orlando, Orange County Public Schools Compact, the Central Florida Disability Chamber, and the Florida Department of Juvenile Justice. Dorea is a proud alumni of the University of Central Florida with a BA in Organizational Communication. She obtained her master's in Human Resources from Rollins College and is a credentialed human resource professional and coach, to include SHRM's Senior Certified Professional, HRCI Senior Professional in Human Resources, IPEC Coachings, Certified Professional Coach, and Energy Leadership Index Master Practitioner. You go ahead, girl, with your bad self. I mean, my goodness. We are honored to have you here with us today. And so we are just, again, looking forward to this conversation and just the wealth of knowledge that we know that you're going to bring together with it.
Yes. Gosh, we're in the presence of HR royalty.
I mean, literally.
I love it. That's great.
And after hearing that bio, I'm like reevaluating my daily schedule.
I'm like, okay, what do I now need to do to upgrade a little bit? It challenges you to become better, which I love.
So, you know what? We're going to jump right in. How about that?
Sounds good.
First I wanted to start off with, can you share with us your journey and what drew you to focus on DEI initiatives?
Well, as you can tell, I was born into this world a female. And I'm also Black. And my parents are both from Louisiana. And my nationality, we're French Creole. And so I started my personal journey already being in the space of diversity. My dad was in the military, and so I lived on, military bases. And I came to a point in time where I remember even as a child being asked by my friends at school, "Are you adopted?" Because I didn't look like my parents. My parents are very light-skinned. I'm darker skinned. And so my DEI journey started at a very young age. And then you fast forward into the world of work, where I found my passion and love for HR. And I've been in HR for a little over 35 years now. And so started off DEI early on. We even call it that back then. Yeah, it really was more about discrimination. And there's been this total evolution of DEI over the last several years. And so in my current role, we don't have a DEI department, but we're doing DEI each and every day. And primarily because of how diverse Rosen Hotels and Resorts is as a organization. I also would share that, my journey with DEI is personal and professional. I have 2 adult sons who both have disabilities. One has type 1 diabetes, and my other one has a mental health condition. They know that when I talk or share, they're open to that because it's truly helped me to become an advocate in that space. And so my DEI journey has really been both personally and as well as professionally.
Mhm. Yeah, I could relate with that as well. There's so many things that intersect each other that pretty much makes these initiatives important to us. And so, yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
That's good. So, in your experience, DeRay, like how do generational or cultural differences, influence how people perceive and engage with DEI initiatives? Like, have you seen, beliefs vary across these types of lines?
Absolutely. So, we all know as HR practitioners and professionals that there's, 5 generations in the workplace. And, kind of going back to my role here at Rosen, very diverse. And, it crosses every intersection of DEI. I remember one of my first experiences at Rosen was as a new HR manager, just the I-9 process. And you're probably like, well, what do you even mean by that? This was the first job that I had as an HR professional where when completing I-9 forms, you'd be amazed at the number of I'm going to say non-traditional, American citizens where they're providing you with a driver's license, social security card that I had to learn and understand and navigate more, with individuals that have, work visas or, temporary status. And so that was the, kind of the first moment that I was like, wow, this is truly a diverse organization. And that was, many years ago. And then to where we are today, when you're talking about, generations in the workplace, there's just, so much to learn and understand. Each and every day we're faced with various situations, whether it's, conflict, whether it's understanding, it's the full gamut. Our Probably the biggest challenge that we have at Rosen when we're talking about generations is just the struggles of our leaders. Again, very diverse, and a lot of times they are not sure about how to navigate. And let me set up a little bit of context for you. So, our 3 primary languages at Rosen, and of course there's many others, but our 3 primary languages are English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. So we do everything in all 3 languages. And, we make a concerted effort to hire based on, those dynamics. And we do pretty well. So a lot of conversations that have to happen in other languages. And so, and then there comes the piece of, whether someone, and from an agent, we have people that are in their, 70s and 80s working with us. And they're also working with alongside individuals, just starting their career. And so there's just a whole host of things that we have to navigate in this space.
Definitely. And then just even thinking about just the generational differences, younger generations like millennials and Gen Z, they tend to prioritize like inclusivity, social justice, much more openly. And, they often expect organizations to take, bold stances and implement progressive DEI practices. But on the other hand, older generations, they might focus more on like practical or compliance driven aspects of DEI, seeing that it's part of a broader organizational type of, value or legal, obligations that come up. But, when I think about all this, as HR professionals, it's definitely, essential to recognize these differences and tailor communication and initiatives, accordingly. One size fits all, it rarely works. And by fostering, open dialogue and creating spaces where diverse, perspectives can be shared, we can build DEI strategies that resonate across generational and cultural lines by doing that. And education is key.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. You talk about, cultural, even, I kind of shared with the dynamics of our population. I remember my first couple of weeks in HR here at Rosen. And because I only spoke English, I had to always rely on someone to translate for me in employee relations issues, whether that be in Spanish or Creole. And so, talk about diversity and learning, and even cultural. I'll never forget. I was dealing with a room attendant that was not very happy with her manager holding her accountable for something, and she actually started carrying on and getting loud and threw herself on the floor and started, just it caught me off guard. In HR and we see a lot.
Yeah, we do.
See and deal with a lot. But that was the first time that I had ever experienced something like that. And I learned over time, it's easy for us to sometimes judge or make our own interpretations about what we think is going on. And then over time, I learned that, sometimes, this is sometimes how people just respond or react. And you just kind of learn to embrace it and learn how to navigate it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I could really appreciate Rosen Hotel because my mother was a Haitian immigrant and she worked as a housekeeper for 20 something years here in Orlando and started in the late 80s. And I have to tell you that that didn't exist, having, individuals in the HR office that speak the same language. And so it's so essential because I do know in the hospitality industry, there's a high prevalence of, Haitian workers. And so it's so important to be able to provide the same opportunities that English speaking workers have. So I really do commend Rosen Hotel for that.
I am very proud of the fact that we're probably one of the only hotel companies in Central Florida that will still hire entry level for certain individuals that are not maybe forward facing, guest facing positions. If they're not 100% fluent in English, you know what? That's okay. We make sure that we can hire and train. We offer English classes. We do a lot to meet our associates where they're at. I think it's what's caused us to have such a great brand reputation. And so yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Nadia.
Thank you. All right. So what personal values do you hold that you believe are essential for a successful DEI strategy?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. So, I've done my values assessments and different assessments to kind of see where I stand. And I have to admit that for me, especially in the DEI space, I would say love, trust, and transparency are probably three of the values. I'll also say love of learning. I'm going to add love and love of learning as kind of a fourth. And so for me, I think those are both very critical values that I hold dear to me. And how I know when they haven't been honored is when something happens and, I kind of have to get like Dorea like, and just recognizing that my value hasn't been honored. Yeah, so I would say definitely those four. And when I say love, what I mean by that is I have this belief that there's a spectrum of love, and when you're talking about DEI, at the beginning you have to be open and receptive to listen and embrace, especially when you're talking about individuals for whatever reason that may be much different than you, or maybe they're the same as you. And so, I feel that love is very important. And when you love, sometimes when I say love is a high value of mine, people are like, really? And so, again, I go back to that spectrum, the spectrum of love from love and hate. And if we can find a way to steer away from hate and just kind of remain in the middle, I have found that really serves us well and has served me well in this space. And then, I mentioned love of learning. We're all, as we're interacting with individuals, whether personally or professionally, those interactions can be eye-opening, great opportunities for us to check ourselves, and, really get to, know what it is that is being tried to convey, or, what our experience has been or what their experience has been, to really kind of all lead forward on this positive path.
I love those. It's got me over here thinking, my wheels are sitting here turning. I'm like, that was such a great question, Nadia, because when I think about that question and even the values that I have been pushing a lot lately and just things that I've been putting out, just to help business ownership wise is empathy. And so that's definitely something that's at the top of my list because when you think about empathy itself, truly understanding and just valuing others' perspective, it's the foundation of inclusivity. And without empathy, it's impossible to like do things like designing strategies that genuinely address the needs and experiences of diverse individuals. And I also think about humility as well, because DEI, it's a journey. It's not a destination. And when you recognize that there's, always more than one way to learn, being open to feedback and acknowledging mistakes even along the way, it's crucial for creating like inclusive environments. It's just a growth oriented type of culture. Yeah. So now I'm curious, Nadia, what values comes to mind for you?
I would definitely say empathy for sure. And, as you all were speaking, I'm thinking about like my history and, as an HR professional, it's so natural for us to be accepting and understand others more than maybe individuals that you grew up with, or maybe if you grew up in a church environment or individuals who are more closed-minded. And sometimes I often feel that my acceptance of others is frowned upon. From people in my personal life because of just being able to accept others. And so I think it's just my value of like empathy and understanding of others and even love. I always like to explain my feelings for my staff of love because I care for them. And so definitely I just was thinking about that as you all were speaking, just the clash that I have in my life personally being in this role.
When you, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was going to say, and, in this conversation about, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I also identified, trust and transparency. We know that, if you just look at trust, you want to trust the organization that you work with, that they have strategies or initiatives in place, and awareness over the issues that can kind of come up. Whether it's recruiting, hiring, performance management, coaching, counseling, you name it. You want to make sure that you're aligned within an organization that's going to respect you and all others as individuals. And when that's not aligned, it could cause some true issues. Trust is
very lasting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
And transparency. And so, a lot of times, and for me, that's a big one in this space. There's a lot of organizations out there that say they do it. But so do you do it and do you live by it? Do you do it to kind of bring people into the organizations? And once they're within the organization, are you true to, what you say you do and how you do it? And so I know that that's one thing that, at Rosen, that we really try to be, that company, culturally, that, we talk about, DEI, that who we say we are to the outside world as we're recruiting and hiring. Once you get here, you feel that you're included, you feel that you're being treated equitably. In our, hospitality is a lot of times, and we talk about senior leadership. A lot of times, I know when I first entered, 23 years ago, in the hotel space, that, a lot of times general managers were men, senior leaders were men, and 24 hours, 7 days a week. I don't know if that was the basic foundation of why that happened. And we've definitely made some huge strides over time. Especially here at Rosen, we have, more women in senior leadership, other than the HR director, because HR directors a lot of times will be that like position that stands for the female, right? And so it's nice to know that I'm aligned with an organization that has really embraced that. In fact, today we have 3 general managers who are Black females.
Really?
Yes. Yeah,
Ah,
we sure do. Yeah. And
impressive.
that's, yeah. So, yeah. So yeah, when there's, those values are key in
Hmm.
DEI, and there really definitely has to be alignment for individuals.
Absolutely. I can agree with you more. 'Cause I'm like, it's nothing more important than actually being a part of a company that doesn't just walk the walk, they also talk the talk. Right. And so, like, what they have put out there, how they've branded themselves, it's actually that when people step through those doors, it's not something completely different, like a culture shock than how a company may have represented themselves. Mhm. So that brings me to my next question. I'm curious, Ray, can you share with us, like, maybe a time where you witnessed a DEI initiative successfully bridge a belief-based, divide within an organization, and like what types of elements made that effort effective?
Oh, that's a good question. So if I had to pull one, um, I want to pull one that's like substantial. I want to pull one with, and so for me, it's gonna probably be what happened with George Floyd. Um, I don't know if you all remember kind of where you were, what you were doing during that time.
I remember where I was. I was
Okay.
dealing with all of it to this day.
Yeah. So, at Rosen, like I said, diversity training, we do the things. We don't have impact groups. We're in the process now in this current time of launching impact those things. And, we tried to make some efforts to get to a point where, with, upward mobility and leadership. And like I said, we're making some advances there. Um, but when the George Floyd situation happened, it really rocked, our world, the nation, and definitely my organization. And so at the time I was assistant director, not the director. And I remember going to my director and us sitting around talking about like, what do we need to do? We felt this need to do something. And so we decided we talked and we strategized on really kind of how we wanted to tackle it. And the need for it really came about because of the individuals in HR where we were having individual conversations to take care of one another. And so that's what kind of launched us to decide, we probably need to do something company wide. And so it was me, the director of HR, Johnny, and then another individual on the leadership team who handles kind of community, other philanthropy kind of obligations within the company. We decided to bring our Black associates to the table, most of them in leadership, primarily in leadership, and just check in with them and see how they were doing and so forth. And so for me, that was probably one of the most impactful strategy, more tied to initiative that we hadn't really done before. And so, yeah, that's the one that really kind of comes to mind.
Yeah, I definitely remember that time. I was still in corporate at that point. And so I remember hearing about what different organizations were doing for their employees, which was huge. But then I also heard on the flip side, there were some organizations that just kind of moved along as if it didn't have any type of impact or, even do check-ins. So to hear that Rosen just did something like that, I mean, it definitely just again speaks volumes as to the type of company that you guys have and how you truly care for your employees, because not every company does it or kind of shows it in ways where it's really needed. And in times like that, even though it may not have directly impacted the company, you still have staff members that were impacted in some way, shape, or form and needed to know at that point that, hey, I see you.
Yeah.
Is there something I can do? Is there some type of resources we can make sure that we're providing?
Yeah. And I've learned on this journey how important it is to, and as HR professionals, we always have to be in touch and kind of what's going on in the outside world anyway, because what happens in our communities, in our state, in our nation, in the world, it transitions into the workplace.
Yeah.
And so, and when you're talking about DEI issues, then, you have to have your finger on the pulse. You really have to kind of have an understanding of what's going on so you can meet your people where they're at, check in and make sure they're okay. In hospitality, we understand that if you're not okay, there's no way possible that you're going to be able to take care of each other and our guests the way that we would expect you to. So that one is the one that really kind of came to mind for me.
Yeah, I would have to say, unfortunately, I was a part of an organization that didn't address it. So yes, I am that group. I am proud to say the current organization I'm with, they had an all-staff meeting to have employees discuss it and just go through their emotions. So I'm glad I made the move.
Well, I'm now out on my own, so I'm pushing that with my clients, and trust me, it's a good impact.
So, Dorea, have you experienced a situation where your personal values conflicted with your organization's DEI policies? And if so, can you share an example?
Yeah, I'm over here thinking not.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, ask that question again.
Have you ever experienced a situation where your personal values conflicted with your organization's DEI policies? And if so, can you share an example?
Yeah. I can't really say that they have, not specific to policy. If I were to pull something, probably the only, because you think about it, in HR, we're the ones driving and writing the policies, we're the ones doing the training. And so that's why I struggled a little bit, but I have pulled something. So, coming back from the pandemic, so I mentioned, we've done harassment training. We've done diversity training. We do these trainings, even civility training at one point. But I will say that coming back from the pandemic, we did not restart diversity training. And so I went to my training manager. I'm like, yeah. So like, what's going on here? And, she shared with me that she had some concerns about just everything going on in the state of Florida. And our diversity training program, we took like years to put this together. It was, it embraced a whole lot of, different things. Like we went to different trainings and things to kind of borrow ideas and things of that nature to then be able to incorporate and build our own program. And one of the activities, I think it's actually the Covey guy, Stephen Covey, is that his name?
Yeah.
I think we went to a training and this has been a really long time, where there's this activity where we kind of place categories and then we place labels, and a lot of it is based on like stereotypes and things of that nature. And so she shared with me she was not comfortable really going back to that training, just with everything going on in Florida and so forth. And so I have to admit that was probably the only time where I was like, okay, so I understand what's going on in the state of Florida. I understand that, this is who we are. We have a diversity statement. And so what do we need to do to bring about a different outcome than if, maybe we just change up the activity. So that's probably the only time I found myself in this conflict of, she wanted to kind of just scrap it. And I was like, oh, I don't think we need to really scrap it. I think we need to, revisit it and find a way to make it happen so that it meets the needs and everybody's happy. So, yeah.
Well, that was a great example.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think about one example that comes to mind for me. It was when I was working for an organization that they had, a DEI policy on paper, but wasn't truly living those values like in practice itself. The policies existed to check, a compliance box rather than fostering, meaningful types of change. And for example, there was a little, to no effort actually with having diversity, or really an effort to diversify leadership or create safe spaces for, employees to voice concerns. So, that definitely conflicted with my own, personal value of authenticity. Just the belief that DEI must be more than a lip service, and should reflect actionable, types of commitments. And it was, difficult to very much balance my role in supporting that type of policy as written while also pushing, more impactful actions. I mean, and this is why I kind of really push programs and different businesses that I work with, like mentorship, and really for those that are underrepresented, and having implicit bias types of training for leaders itself. So, what role do you feel, DeRay, self-reflection and personal growth play in navigating conflicts between, belief systems and DEI values? Like, how do you encourage this within your own team or just organization as a whole?
That's a great question. Well, honestly, it starts with me. So as the director of HR and, I say, in charge of the people, it's important for me to be able to self-reflect, and, understand and be open and be that, have my finger to the pulse and be an active listener. And, all of those things. If I'm setting the example, if I'm being the example, then I feel like the rest follows. And in the space where this would generally come up would be in employee relations. And I have a whole team and I still personally have oversight of that team. I don't have kind of managers in other areas of HR, but employee relations is still an area that I'm kind of daily overseeing. And so, we do a lot of coaching. I incorporate a lot of my coaching practices and principles into, interactions and, how are you showing up? How are you making decisions? What's getting in the way? What are you walking away with learning from that situation, that interaction? Making sure that they understand, we're all human and we all judge. What self-awareness do you have about you as an individual and how you're judging? I love because the team are, in and out of my office and we meet every Friday and we kind of like case manage, if you want to call it that. It's really kind of the higher situations. And I bring these up and you're like, okay, what does that have to do with DEI? It has everything to do with DEI.
Mm-hmm. I bet, yeah.
And we're talking about people, people issues, conflict, and decision making. And some of the decision making that I'm talking about is, whether this person's being held accountable, and is a manager holding them accountable the right way. And so there's just all these issues that, we're entrusted within our organization. And I want to make sure that my team has a great understanding of themselves, in order to make sure as they're guiding and advising and advocating for other individuals in the organizations that they're doing it from this space of, curiosity, love. There's that love again.
There's that word.
And honoring and making sure that they are, protecting, of course, the company, protecting the associate. And, and just, making sure that we're doing what we need to do. I hope I answered the question. I realize that sometimes I get off.
No, that was actually great. I mean,
Okay.
it's, you always kind of send me into a state of just, man, like just kind of thinking. And I wish I could just sit here and just take notes.
Oh, I think you're on. Oh,
She had silenced herself.
I did, because there was a large garbage truck in my background. I was scared to get picked up. But what I was saying is, it's funny because my next question really was going to talk about, decision making. And I feel like you've already started answering it. But, I wanted to know, like, when faced with a conflict between your values and DEI objectives, how do you approach decision making?
and so that's great. It's a great question because it does tie into that. What I love about this meeting that we have on Fridays and the fact that we have all ladies on our ER team, all of our ladies, we're always check and balancing. I'm going to tell you, like, it's a pretty lively conversation. I mean, there's debate, there's discussion, there's disagreement. And again, it's about people issues. And so, again, when you asked about decision making, we don't take any decision lightly involving people here. And keep in mind, not every situation lands in HR. So when I talk about decisions, what I'm really talking about are those decisions that are high level. Either the associate has raised their hand out of some concern, or maybe the manager, or it's come, a document or something's come across the HR desk, or now it's through technology. And somebody has stopped and said, oh, this doesn't look right or feel right or seem right. And that's where a lot of this conversation comes to play. At Rosen, we also have a policy that nobody loses their job at Rosen unless I sign off on it. And so, with the exception of attendance, my team can sign off on, but everything else has to come under my preview. So I'm, making sure all of our I's are dotted, T's are crossed, that the person has been treated fairly and consistently. And if they want to raise their hand, because what happens,
Yes.
because they come and they want to tell you about this issue. And if they've been here 11 years, they also want to tell you about the last things that have bothered them over the last 11 years too. And sometimes you're surprised, we don't always entertain, depends on how much time we have. But it's amazing just some of the things that you hear unrelated to why they're here a lot of times, but you gain some interesting information at times.
Right.
And so I guess to kind of wrap up, Mike, I get a little long-winded here because I get very excited about this topic. Decision making, we don't take lightly. I don't take lightly. I want to make sure that everybody has a voice, an opinion. And at the end of the day, we may not always agree. I love, it's kind of a coaching concept about choices. In life, we all have choices that serve us and choices that don't. And not making a choice is also a choice. And helping people understand that, we have a job to do, we have decisions to make, just like you did. But at the end of the day, you're going to be fine. You're going to, move on and do what you have to do. And you're like, okay, so this sounds like more like HR. How does this play into, DEI? Because we're talking about people.
Yeah.
And in this day and age, DEI is everything about people. And sadly, I feel sometimes we lose sight of that. We put kind of people in boxes, and so I wanted to make sure that I can continue to make that correlation.
Well, I'll tell you, Dorea, it actually feeds directly into a question that I wanted to ask you, and that is, how do you believe leaders can create a space for respectful disagreement within DEI conversations, allowing for differing personal beliefs without, compromising inclusivity?
That's Lakita, that's a great question. And I wish I had the answer for that one. Yeah. That's tough. You know why it's tough? Because I struggle with it. And let me tell you what I mean by that. A lot of times when I'm having a conversation with somebody in leadership, a lot of times it's because of a decision that's been made and, they're given pushback. And I'm coming from a space of the person and I'm trying to influence them in whatever way. And I'm not getting where I need to get to. And like I said, I have lots of tactics, lots of tools in my toolbox. And many times it works, but in those situations where it doesn't work, I find myself pulling out the compliance card. And I have to admit that there's been times when I've said in a conversation with the leader, do you realize that, how you're even addressing me is making me feel a certain kind of way, more like it's personal versus professional. And so, like I said, your question was a beautiful question. And at the end of the day, I wish I had the answer. And so I guess the answer I would give is, based on my long-winded explanation there, is that the biggest impact is one conversation at a time.
Yeah.
Really is kind of a one conversation at a time approach. And you hope that people learn. I love telling stories. I love using examples. I love using analogies. Like I said, I pull every tool out of the toolbox that I have sometimes. And eventually I'll get there. I think we get there. And I'm talking about me because I'm dealing with these situations, but I have a whole team. They too have similar experiences, and they too have learned, how to, tell stories or how to use examples to get a manager to where we need them to get to.
I can't agree with you more because, like, when I think about that, I've always kind of said, an effective approach, for leaders is actively listening. So right along the lines of what you're talking about in terms of communication, actively listening, by truly hearing and acknowledging different viewpoints, even those that, of course, we might not agree with. Leaders, by doing that, they can demonstrate, of course, that all voices matter. And it doesn't mean that every belief, will align with the organization values, but it ensures people feel heard and respected.
Yeah, that's, and Lakita, what resonated with me there is the difference between us sometimes in HR doing it, and we're talking about leaders kind of taking that same stance or approach, is that I find in HR, and there's certain leaders, and so I want to make sure that I clarify. We have a lot of magnificent leaders, caring, loving leaders. Where they struggle, going back to your point of active listening, is they're busy. Not that we're not busy, but they're busy running their operation, and this communication and active listening and being engaged and being open and two-way communication takes time. And sadly, people don't want to dedicate or devote the time that it takes. They don't realize putting in the time on the front end is going to save you a lot of time on the back end. And that's another thing that I find really sets this kind of this piece of the conversation apart.
For sure.
Sorry, my light keeps going in and out because I'm not moving around enough. So.
Is it trying to feel like, is she still there? Is she still there?
Yeah, no, I'm still here. The light decides to go off if I don't move around enough.
Oh, you're on mute. Looks like.
Again, I have two loud airplanes passing by, so I just put myself on mute. I don't notice how noisy my background is until like I'm recording something. But the question I wanted to ask was, what advice would you give other, HR professionals who are struggling with, similar conflicts in their DEI efforts? What advice would you give us?
Yeah. That's another really great question. One, we've had a lot of conversation today about values. Really identify what your values are. I'm being transparent here because, I said transparency is one of my high values. I have been in many years, I would go through team building or activities where we're talking about values. And I have to admit, I kind of poo-pooed it. Like, I didn't really get it. It didn't really connect for me. And I'm glad I'm to where I am today on this journey, that I really understand when people say value, what it really means, and what happens when it's not being honored. And so, the first thing I would say is, and, hopefully, I'm sure people probably get there faster than I do. Sometimes I can be slow on things like that I just don't connect right away. So definitely, find out what your true values are, and why, and make sure they're being honored. So then when they're not being honored, you understand, why you're feeling or behaving, the way that you are. And so I'm sorry, Nadia, can you repeat the question? I get on this, I'm just like feeling the zen and the mood.
It's in her element. So she's just,
what advice would you give, other HR professionals who are struggling with, having conflicts with their personal beliefs and DEI efforts that they have to implement?
And let me throw this in too. What support systems or resources do you rely on when it comes to things like that?
Yeah. So I understand why I was talking about values. Yep. Values. I believe a lot of it is just different being, put in different situations and scenarios and learning in the moment and in the experience. And being able to evaluate, be able to look back and say, okay, I could have done that better. I could have said that better. And now don't beat yourself up over it. Don't let it impact you moving forward. Is another, I think, important thing. I think the experience and because again, we're dealing with people. I say in training all the time, or when I'm talking to leaders, I wish I had the magic book of answers to point to your situation and give you the answer to it. And that is just unrealistic in the world of HR and the world of DEI, because again, it's unrealistic in the world of people challenges. And so I don't know that there's really best, a great tool other than, professional development, any type of training, or conferences on the subject, because I think you walk away learning and having additional tools in your toolbox. But for me, I feel, and if I were going to give advice to others, it's just that. Don't beat yourself up over situations or interactions that you have where you feel that you misstepped or said the wrong thing, or, and the beauty of an apology. A lot of times, an apology and emotional intelligence. Those two go hand in hand. So many times you'll be interaction with someone and you'll see that clearly they have that look. And then all of a sudden you're just acting like the look doesn't even mean anything. So get curious about the look and explore the look further. And then, oh my gosh, like what a great opportunity for learning and growth. And so those are probably the things I would give as advice.
That's some great advice, Ray. I mean, I certainly couldn't agree with you more. And I know that we're unfortunately coming up upon time. I mean, I feel like we can just keep talking to you forever, literally. So just one of the last questions that I had for you is, how do you see the future of DEI evolving to address the growing diversity of beliefs within the workplace? And what types of trends or approaches do you think could help DEI stay adaptable and inclusive?
Yeah, we've been on this roller coaster ride, I feel, within DEI. You hear of information about, DEI departments or, leaders in the DEI space. First they're the hottest commodity and then they're not, they're being laid off. I really would love for our nation to, make a decision, understand the value, and it's not about DEI, it's about people. At the end of the day, sometimes we get so focused on, the DEI piece of it. We're talking about people issues, people challenges, people interactions. And, the more that we can make that shift, about how we are different, how we are the same, how we think differently, how we act differently, I think, that really is the bigger opportunity for the future. We'll and in the state of Florida, I'm keeping it real. In the state of Florida, our sometimes the politics gets a little bit in the way, and I think as organizations, you have to stay true, because kind of what we were talking about earlier. Sometimes we say we're going to do this, but we don't follow through, and so I think that that's also important for the future. As organizations, we definitely need to recognize the importance and the value it brings. Stay true to it. When there are challenges or issues, whether they're internal or external, as we talked about too, don't ignore it. Have your finger on the pulse. Find out if you, as an organization, you as an HR team, you as an HR leader, need to address it, and then figure out what you need to do to address it. And at the end of the day, you want to make sure that your people are okay, and whole, and fulfilled. And so, I mean, I kind of guess that's what I would do. I mentioned earlier, we're launching impact groups. And so we're kind of on that journey now. We've done a lot of research and a lot of discovery. We just feel it's time where it could really make an impact. And so I'm looking forward to that within my company to see where that's going to go. Yeah.
That itself sounds exciting, just impact groups. I'm like, I've never heard of an organization doing something like that. I know that we're close in time, but do you care to share a little bit more as to the purpose behind that? How did that even come about with Rosen wanting to do something like that?
So they're the ER, you probably heard them called employee resource groups. We're just, instead of using the ER groups, we're calling it impact groups.
Okay.
And so we've had for a long time, health and wellness is key in our company. And so we launched we'll call it impact group. We didn't really call it that, but it's like an impact group in the wellness space that's probably been in existence for 8 to 10 years. And so we did this whole initiative where we educate our population on ERGs and impact groups. We survey to see what would you like to see. We decided to start off with, I think, the top 3. And so people voted on, what they'd like to see. And I think the 3 are women in leadership, emerging leaders, and Black African American were the 3 groups that were the top 3. And so we're going to start with them, and there were others, and we'll slowly roll them out as we continue to learn and grow and impact the organization with them. So, yeah.
Wow, that sounds exciting. And I would be interested to see how that turns out for you guys. I know it's going to be successful, though. So as we prepare to wrap up today's discussion, I just want to leave everybody with a thought. Let's just remember that fostering inclusivity, it isn't just about erasing differences. It's about embracing them while staying grounded, in shared values and navigating the clash between, belief systems and DEI. It can be challenging, but it's in these types of conversations that growth happens. So, let's continue to listen, let's continue to learn, and definitely create spaces where everybody feels valued and respected.
And I'm hoping that, leaders of organizations really realize that, diversity efforts, it's so much beyond, what you see on the surface of an individual. It's, different areas, and everyone has their differences, and it's all about understanding and education. And so sometimes, as you stated, we see it fading away. I don't want to see it fade away because it's so important. The workforce is becoming more diverse, and it's all about just really understanding who you're working with. And so, that is one thing that I'm hoping for, not seeing it disappear,
Same.
Yep, absolutely.
And you know what? And I just thank you again, Dorea, for joining us today. This has been, just a great conversation. And I know just as I sat here and took a lot from it, I know our audience did as well.
So,
Thank you for having me.
Of course. We're honored to have you. We're in the presence of royalty.
yes. And then, of course, for our audience, I hope you all enjoyed this conversation. And as we always state, if you have any questions or topics that you'd like us to address, please email us at diversity@gosherm.org.
Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Stay tuned for more upcoming episodes. This is the All People Podcast.